The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. I'm Deborah Monk, empowering you to find your creative voice. And today we have a Writer's Block party for one. We are going to put me in the hot seat. Instead of being the interviewer, I'm going to be the interviewee. So when we all publish our first book, we think that the press will just start calling. And I'll be honest, I sat by my phone like a 16-year-old before prom, and I kept picking the phone up to make sure that it was working because it was not ringing. In the beginning, you have to do all of the reaching out and legwork for any press that you're going to get. But over time, you can build momentum, and now that my third book has just been released, there is some interest, and I will be honest, my phone is ringing, not quite off the hook, and my email is pinging. When one of the interviews that I was asked to do was through Lisa Tenner. She's an award-winning book and writing and publishing coach, and her associate Olivia reached out and asked to interview me. And Lisa Tenner did one of the blurbs on the back of the book, which apparently I had been told one of those rules. Sometimes I stick to it, sometimes I break it, but the back blurb should be 3 to 5 words. And I thought, well, how can 5 words describe a book? But Lisa Tenner wrote for Storytime for Grown-Up Women and the Girls Who Will Become Them. She wrote Magical Realism Meets Personal Truth. 5 words, and she managed, I think, to capture my book quite well. So when her associate Olivia reached out and asked if she could interview me, of course I said yes. And when her questions came in, they actually touched my heart and showed the skill and preparation that goes into someone who's going to ask questions on an interview, so I thought I would share it with you. It also gave me a lot of positive reinforcement that I had delivered the book that I wanted and also the message that I wanted. So today, playing Olivia, asking me the questions, we're going to have a voice off camera that we may all recognize.
It's me.
Yes. So Jonathan, a.k.a. Olivia, from Lisa Tenner's office.
This was just dumped on my lap, folks. I wasn't asked about this previously. I've had no prep time.
That's okay. Olivia
I don't know what my motivation is. I've had no coaching, but I'll do my best.
But I know a good coach, Lisa Tenner. Actually, Jonathan, Lisa Tenner, do you know how we met her originally years and years ago? You, David, and I went down to Rhode Island and did a Saturday afternoon writing.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I met her probably, 18 years ago.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Anyway.
All right. So she writes, what a unique book. Each chapter reads like a fairy tale. And the book is full of wisdom that relates to real women's lives. What inspired you to write Storytime for Grown-Up Women and the Girls Who Will Become Them?
Great question, Olivia.
My name's not Olivia.
So, Wings and a Tail had been percolating inside of me for a long time. I had been feeling that. You've heard me say on the show that sometimes I really do believe I'm a mermaid and part fairy. So that story had been inside of me, but I didn't think I had that kind of voice. I didn't think I could write magically enough. So I have a friend who writes very magically. She has beautiful word choice. And so I reached out to her and I asked her if she would write the book for me. I told her I would tell her the story and I would just give her the guideline of the story and would she write it? It wasn't something I was ever going to release. It was just I wanted to see this story on paper. And once I told her the story, her response was, write it exactly like that. And she gave me the confidence that that was the story I needed to tell. And then once I did that, I just couldn't stop.
The characters in your story often represent women connecting with their spirituality, undergoing changes, and becoming their true selves. Do you think these themes are especially important in today's world? How do your own personal experiences inform you on writing these themes?
I feel that right now this is an incredibly important message for women at every stage in life. I believe the aspect of empowerment that has been lacking for women in the past few decades is the idea that forward is the only way to make progress. I think that forward is a great way to make progress, but it's not the only way. I think you need stillness and reflection as well in order to make true transformation.
And lateral movement's okay, and even taking a step back so you can go 2 steps forward and slingshotting.
Exactly.
That's good.
Exactly. There's so much focus on progress that I think we've lost some of the quieter, finer arts of reflection. And
I'm a big fan of stillness. The stories can resonate with women in many different stages of life, from young professionals to empty nesters. The title, Storytime for Grown-Up Women and the Girls Who Will Become Them, indicates that you had an adult woman as well as young girls in mind as the intended audience. How did you get the idea to write fairy tales for grown-ups? And what do you hope your audience will take away from this book?
I really wanted to write a book that a woman would read to a young girl and that the woman would be glad that she read it, that she would take something out of it too. So initially I wrote them for girls, hence the line inside the cover, be good, be quiet, behave, imagine instead if we taught our girls to be brave. But what became clear to me is there is power and wisdom in the simplicity of a children's story. So for a young girl hearing the stories, I hope they plant the seeds of wisdom. And for women reading the stories, I hope they recognize themselves so they can find their own simple truth again.
It's like the Disney Pixar cartoons that are obviously written for kids,
Right.
but there are adult themes in the movies. So really, fairy tales could cross over very easily, and they clearly do.
Absolutely. And there's so much power in the simplicity of that story.
Absolutely. Each story is so different. Some are traditional fairy tales with magic and animal characters. Some are poems. Other are stories about humans in a world like ours with a magical and spiritual element. Can you please talk about your craft as an author? I feel like Barbara Walters right now.
And I've said this on the show before, but sometimes, for a writer, it would seem that it would be easy. As a person who writes, you use words to express yourself. And I think that I can write the words, and I oftentimes can't say them. So when I have a feeling that's expanding inside of me, it's usually the character that comes to me first, whether it's a lamb or a butterfly. And then through her, I express the feelings that I need to get out. It's almost like a way to identify my feelings by having them go through a third character. And it was especially interesting because my first two novels clearly had a lot to do with, I used a lot of my personal experience. But I was writing through women. These stories, I'm writing about a lamb and a butterfly, which gave me more freedom to really say whatever I wanted. It was really quite
It's like last week's
exciting
episode with Jessie, where she had experienced the bullying in high school, and then made that person a troll in the book and killed him off, or whatever she did to him.
Well, right, and she made a character who got through the bullying, which helped her believe that she
Right.
could get through it. Exactly.
Storytime for Grown-Up Women is full of rich imagery and symbolism. A girl with fairy wings and a mermaid's tail, a lamb in soft bunny slippers walking down a lonely trail, Mother Nature's wise words becoming butterflies on the wind. Where do you get the inspiration for images like these?
I see them. The images are attached to the feelings, and then seeing the stories is how I write them. There was a line in The Lost Lamb that I ended up taking out, even though I loved it, that summarized the story for me. And it was all hyphenated, all one word. So it's a full sentence, but with hyphens between every word. This bunny slipper wearing lamb is feeling brave. Because why would a lamb wear bunny slippers?
Well, I think we've all worn bunny slippers.
Who hasn't?
You don't feel like you're going to conquer the world when you're wearing bunny slippers. You feel like you want to get into something warm and have some hot cocoa and maybe do a little snuggle.
Yeah.
You're not conquering anything in bunny slippers.
See, I kind of disagree. In my imaginary world, there is a store that carries bunny slippers in every kind of shoes. There are bunny slipper rain boots, bunny slipper ballet flats, and bunny slipper high heels. So I think that maybe the world would be conquered in a better way if it was conquered by someone wearing bunny slippers.
Oh, I just thought it was cool, the juxtaposition. Somebody in bunny slippers is feeling like they can conquer the world, which is the opposite of what you normally would feel wearing bunny slippers.
Exactly. And that's why it was so important, because why would that? You said it better than I could say it. But see, so that was what I was trying to say, is exactly what you said without using those words. What came to me is a little lamb who has to wear slippers.
Made out of
bunny
soft
slippers
little
only.
bunnies.
Yes, not real ones.
Oh, that changes the whole book for me.
Okay.
You've previously written 2 novels, Well-Behaved Women Coming Undone and Searching for Julia Stone. Can you talk about the difference between writing novels and writing short stories and poems? Were there any new challenges or joys that came with writing this type of book?
The thing that surprised me the most between the difference between writing a novel of, say, 50,000 words versus a short story is how much work, how much time and focus and energy goes into writing. I think the Wings and a Tail was approximately 800 words. Well, when you only have 800 words, every single word counts, which is fun, but it's also intimidating. And I'm shocked sometimes.
Quite the challenge, I would imagine.
It's such a challenge because you can't go off a rail anywhere. You can't meander. Like, you've got to really be kind of clear where you're going without making it obvious that you're clear where you're going.
And willing to cut. A lot of stuff ends up on the cutting floor.
Right. And the thing is, if we were to go look at the folder of Wings and a Tail, say, which ends up being 800 words, there are probably 50 pages full of writing. And off the top of my head, I'm going to guess that's probably, 30,000 words to boil it down to the right 800. Every single word matters, which if you tried to write a novel that way, I don't think you could. I don't think you'd finish it in a lifetime. So that was the thing that surprised me the most.
It's not unlike cooking. If you're making
I don't know. So you say.
If you're making a soup, you start off with way more water than you need. You start off with way more vegetables than you need, way more chicken, all that stuff, and everything just boils down, and the goal is to catch the soup at the right amount of evaporation, so now you have the correct salt balance and acid and everything that you need to make soup delicious.
Right.
I digress.
Okay.
You host a podcast called the Writer's Block Podcast NH that you're coincidentally on right now, which helps writers find their creative voice. Did you experience blocks while writing Storytime for Grown-Up Women? What practices or tips do you find most valuable in your own writing practice?
I have to be honest, there was not a single moment of writer's block. Not only that, I already have a folder with notes for all of the stories that will go into volume 2.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And there's the fear dragon. Oh, I love her. She's one of the next ones.
As a writer, podcaster, designer of jewelry and magnets, and ballroom dancer, you've done many different types of creative work. How do the different art forms allow you to express yourself in different ways? Do you see any similarities between them? Do these creative outlets inform each other in any way? What is unique about writing?
For me, the writing, the dancing, all of the creative and my art that I do are all an expression of feeling. So they're very, very related. But each one of them that you've mentioned have taught me something specific. A good example would be dancing, where movement is used for expression. If you look at the cover of Well-Behaved Woman Undone, we can see only part of the woman walking towards us with white roses hanging from her hands. If we had that same woman posed and sitting, it wouldn't evoke the same emotion. And the cover of Storytime shows a young girl with her mother's shoe dangling off her foot. And I hope the image evokes the memory for many women who tried on their mother's shoes and wondered what her life would be like when she grew up. So in each of my creative forms, whether it be jewelry or books or covers or writing or dancing, I try to take the key ingredient of each art form and use the impact across the board.
Interesting, your imagery there. In dance, you have a still top and a bottom that's moving, or vice versa. Very rarely, if ever, are both top and bottom of the body moving. So in order to move the viewer's attention, there needs to be stillness in one area and movement in another. And writing, isn't it the same way?
Very true.
That you're going to draw the reader's attention away from perhaps the fire that's in the background and to the forefront. Maybe you start there, but you're going to create this movement and the background becomes still so that the action can happen.
Right.
On camera, so to speak.
You need contrast in everything. Because if everything is moving, if the top and the bottom is all moving, you're going to lose balance. If nothing's moving, you're not going to be dancing. So it's always about finding the right balance of stillness to frame the movement,
right,
and then movement to frame the stillness. Yes.
The design for Storytime for Grown-Up Women is beautiful. What was the design process like, and who was your designer?
The cover, I did it, and the cover of Storytime was basically a 2-month obsession. I think I could have written two more of the stories. I believe I had over 100 cover concepts in mind, from a black and white butterfly to a tree goddess to I tried dyeing paper with coffee and with dried flowers. And I just wasn't capturing the essence of what I needed this book to be because I wanted it to appeal to old and young. So finally what I did was I wrote down a few adjectives to describe what I wanted you to feel when you looked at the book. And the adjectives I used were whimsical, feminine, and appealing to young and old. And so to me, this concept, and then the girl that I used on the cover, throughout the book, at the beginning of each story inside of the book, since it's a collection of short stories, is a different picture of that same girl. So that it was, and it's not my strength. So it was torture, downright torture. I'm surprised I still have some of the friends, and I would send them a new picture, and they would write back, EH. Oh, you work for 12, you wake up at 4:00 in the morning, you think, oh, this is the idea. I need dried flowers and I'm going to do fairy tale paper with the curved edges. And I literally took a match and burned the edge of the paper because you can't just fake it. So I had burned, I'd work on that for 6 hours from 4 a.m. till 10. I don't know that. And then I would text it to my, Brenda or Kelly, and I would get back just 2 letters, EH, I was like, oh, well, I should have texted them at 4. So it was torture. I would prefer to find somebody else to do this for me. I just haven't found the person who
can do it for you.
They can, yeah.
You offer keepsakes, jewelry, handmade books, and other keepsakes as physical reminders of your books. It's a unique idea. What was your initial inspiration for creating book keepsakes? What role do these talismans play in your own life?
For me, they're very important. I say I like to wear my heart on my sleeve, so that's why I like to make bracelets. I have one of my necklaces on today, which is from that book called Dig Deep, Fly High. And when I put it on each morning, it's almost like a mini meditation for how I want to live the day. I want to remind myself, try not to get caught up in the details, dig deep, fly high. So since I've always wanted to take a piece of a good book with me into the real world, that's why I create the art that goes with them. And for me, I've wanted it all my life. Like ever since I was little, this is what I've wanted, and I've never found it. And I've planned to do it for my whole life. I've never known exactly how it would play out, that you would be able to bring a magic piece, a talisman, a tangible representation of whatever the story meant to you. And this is how I'm doing it now.
Are there any questions that have not been asked?
No, that's crossed out, I think.
It's not crossed out.
It's not? Okay, no. It should have been.
I'll cross it out now.
All righty. Well, that was a wonderful interview.
Thanks.
So it is kind of fun when there's that feeling of making it, of maybe somebody else who doesn't know me, someone outside of my family, really enjoyed my book. And so it was a pleasure to be interviewed by Olivia, and I thank her very much. And when I get the link of where that interview is going to be, I will make sure I post it on the Writer's Block Podcast NH on our Facebook page. And thank you, Jonathan, for filling in.
My pleasure. This should be when you have your closing remarks.
Yes, I had to turn the page. If you want to hear this episode again or share it with a friend, send them to unitedpodcastnetwork.tv. That's unitedpodcastnetwork.tv. You can find this podcast and the vodcast video on demand in case you want to watch it. Find this episode and all previous episodes on unitedpodcastnetwork.tv, and please subscribe.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.